Okay, today what we're going to talk about is meiosis. Okay, meiosis. Now, meiosis is a part of sexual reproduction. Right? We'll go through the goods and bads and everything. But whenever we talk about sexual reproduction, sexual is always going to involve two different things. It's going to involve egg, and it's going to involve sperm, right? Because if we're going to have sex, those are the two cells that you need. Now, these two cells collectively, right, these are called gametes. That's a name for all of them. So, if you're looking at a person, right, all people have gametes. They either have egg-producing parts of their body or they have sperm-producing parts of their body, and that goes for any animal. If I drew a cute little dog right here, okay, this dog has gametes. It doesn't matter if it's a boy dog or a girl dog because it's going to have one or the other. Now, why organisms want to go through sexual reproduction is when you go through sexual reproduction, this is going to give you a lot of genetic diversity. Okay? This is a really, really good thing because if I have genetic diversity, and you can imagine if my environment changes, then, you know, like let's say we have some organisms, and here's some blue ones, right? And then we have some orange ones. There you go, and here's some orange ones. And maybe there wasn't as many of them, and that's okay. But something happens to the environment, right, where all of the blue guys, all of these blue guys have some type of trait that makes them not be able to live. And so now only the orange guys get to live. Well, that's a good thing because let's say that initial population was only made up of blue. Well, if there were only blue organisms and something came around and blue organisms died, that means this entire species would go extinct. But because we had variation within the population, we had diversity, then some of the organisms get to live. That means after a time frame, then we would have more of those organisms that have a beneficial characteristic. That's why we like sex, because sex, if you have, you know, here's an egg and here's your sperm, let's say maybe this guy, this egg right here, carried an orange trait, and maybe this guy carried a blue trait. Well, when those two come together to make a new organism, now that organism is going to have both of those traits. And maybe that will give him an advantage whenever, you know, wherever he's living. Okay, so let's talk about this process right here, this whole egg and sperm coming together. So remember, let's go ahead and put it at the top. Gametes are egg or sperm. And so really what's going to happen during sexual reproduction is I'm going to have an egg and I'm going to have a sperm come together, okay? This process right here, when egg and sperm come together, that's called fertilization. So fertilization definition is when egg and sperm unite. Okay, well now that I have egg and sperm uniting, I get to make this organism, okay? This is one cell big. I had egg and sperm come together, now I get this guy. This one cell has a name. His name is a zygote. So a zygote, by definition, is the union of egg and sperm. Okay, well now that I have a zygote, that's awesome. But, you know, whenever we talk about primarily eukaryote organisms, my organisms don't say one cell big, they're a bunch of cells big. Well, then we just go back to what we've done before. So what helped our organisms grow? What process? That was mitosis. So then this cell right here will go through mitosis, and now I'll be a bunch of cells big. So look, now I have a bunch of cells. And then these cells, what they're going to do, they're going to go through this really handy process called differentiation. Okay, and differentiation just makes you make different cell types. Okay, so now instead of it just being a mass of cells, maybe some of those cells are going to make the head, some of those cells are going to make muscles and skeleton, and some of those cells are going to make legs and eye cells and heart cells. The cool thing about sexual reproduction, though, like we drew just a second ago, is that maybe that cell had that blue chromosome, and then this sperm had a pink one, and now this zygote is going to have a combination of both. And that's really what the desired effect is of sexual reproduction, is that no matter what happens, I'm always going to have diversity. Okay? That's kind of the entire goal. But this is a really simple process for sexual reproduction. You have to have gametes. Those gametes are going to unite. That's called fertilization. Then when they fertilize, I get to make a zygote. That zygote is going to go through mitosis to grow. And then that zygote, or those cells, will go through differentiation to make all of the different types of cells for my organism. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about meiosis, right? Now, meiosis. Word to focus on right there is me. How were you made, right? You were made by egg and sperm. And so meiosis, this is just the process to make egg and sperm. Alright? Now, egg and sperm, okay, we know this. Eggs are going to be made in my ovaries. Sperm is going to be made in my testes. Okay? Now, here's what's going to happen. It's actually pretty simple. Right? So, the cells in my ovaries, the cells in my testes, those have a fancy name, a collective name, okay? These are called germ cells. So germ cells is just a collective name for the cells that make my egg and sperm, okay? So let's say I have a germ cell right here. It doesn't even matter what kind. So this is either a cell inside my ovary or this is a cell inside a testis. And what's going to happen is we're going to go through that same cell cycle process that we've been through before, you know, where you go through G1, SG2, you double everything, you replicate your chromosomes, and then you divide your cell, right? Like that's what we're going to do with meiosis. So instead of mitosis, we're going to use meiosis. So here's my germ cell, right? And let's say he has that chromosome, he has that chromosome. And so he's going to go through cell cycle, which we've done before. And so now this cell is going to have replicated chromosomes. So he's going to have that little fella, and he's going to have that little fella. Okay. Now what's going to happen is meiosis, what is something that's really characteristic of it, is that meiosis is made of two cell divisions. Okay. So I'm going to go through meiosis 1. When I go through meiosis 1, that cell will split. There you go. And so then I'll have a chromosome over on this side, and I'll have a chromosome over on this side. Then I'm going to divide it again. So now I'm going to go through meiosis 2. After I go through meiosis 2, each of those cells are going to split. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then those chromosomes are going to split. So now I have that guy, and I have this guy, and I have this guy. Okay? So this is my end result right here. So I end with 4 cells. Okay? And those 4 cells, they have half the DNA. Because look up here, this starting cell, right? This had 1 copy of each, right? And now down here, they only have half of that. So there was a blue stick and a pink stick, but now this one has a blue, a pink, a pink. So it ends with half the DNA, which is actually super good and really, really important. I know we've talked about how your cells, if you have cells, that you have to have a whole set of DNA to function. But the purpose of meiosis is to make these egg and sperm. And so if I went through this, right, and let's say these are egg cells, okay, and then I had another organism go through the exact same process. So let's just make a little line. We'll draw it super tiny. So here's a cell. He's going to go through cell cycle, ... He's going to go through meiosis 1. He's going to divide. He's going to go through meiosis 2. And here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's draw the chromosomes. So maybe this guy had a blue one and a green one. Okay? So then those double. So there's double. There's double. Then when my cell splits, I'll have one chromosome go to one side. I'll have one chromosome go to the other. And then when he divides again, now I have half, right? So maybe this is a sperm cell. But again, this is a fantastic thing to have half the DNA, because let's say this one sperm cell and this one egg cell come together, so they're going to go through fertilization. And when they go through fertilization, here's my new cell, that's my zygote. Now they have a whole set of chromosomes again, right? So now they have two sticks. They'll have maybe this green stick right here, and then they'll have this blue stick right here. So now they're back to the normal amount of chromosomes that you need for that organism. That's the purpose. Here, let's get a new piece of paper. So the purpose, purpose of fertilization is to restore that chromosome number. All right? Now, when we're talking about chromosome numbers, we actually have really, really fancy words, okay? So imagine if you have a cell, right? So here, this is you, right there. Whenever we talk about you, where do you get your chromosomes from? You get one from your mom, you get one from your dad. And so when we look at these cells, the cells that have two copies, because you were fertilized by your mom's egg and your dad's sperm, those two copies have a name that's called diploid, which makes sense because di means two. So I have two copies in those cells. All right? All body cells are diploid. Okay? That means they have two copies of everyone, and that's the appropriate amount of DNA that you need. Remember, a fancy word for body cells? That was a somatic cell. So a somatic cell is also diploid. And so we could say, you know, examples. This could be a skin cell. This could be a heart cell. This could be an eye cell. All of your normal body cells have two copies of every chromosome, because you got one right here from mom. You got one right here from dad. Now, the purpose of meiosis, right, this whole process, this purpose of meiosis is to make my gametes, which are egg and sperm, that have half the chromosomes. Okay? And so if you have this cell right here, so we either have an egg or we have a sperm, like I just showed you in those pictures, if I divide that thing twice, I'm only going to have one. So that means I only have one copy. One copy, that word is haploid, which is nice because haploid sounds like half. And so this sperm cell is only going to have one copy. He's haploid because he has half the number you need. Okay? Those are the only two cells in your body. Oh, here's sperm. Yeah, those are the only two cells in your body that have half the number of chromosomes. Because when I want to go through, again, when I want to go through sexual reproduction, here's my egg with one chromosome, with half. Okay? Here's my sperm, again with half. They're going to come together. So this right here, I'm in a haploid state. they come together during fertilization. So here's my zygote. My zygote now has 2 copies. So zygote body cell is, whoops, spelled it wrong, is diploid because now he has 2. So what we want to do in sexual reproduction is we want to go from a haploid or a half chromosome state to a diploid state. I want to restore that chromosome number so that way I have the right amount, and that right amount will let my organism function correctly in whatever environment we're talking about. Okay? When we talk about meiosis, right, so we can draw this out. So the process of, remember we start out with some type of germ cell, and a germ cell is either going to be something in an ovary or a testy, doesn't matter. He's going to have a diploid number because this is a body cell. So here's diploid. Then I'm going to go through cell cycle like I had done before. So now my chromosomes are doubled. I have a replicated chromosome. But characteristic of meiosis is I get to divide twice. So meiosis 1, my cell's going to split, and now each cell has just 1 of the replicated chromosomes. Then I go through meiosis 2. My cells are each going to split again, so I get 4, each with half of the information I started with. So like I started with 2 sticks up here in this cell, and now I have 1 stick. So I just made 4 haploid cells, which are going to be my gametes, which can either be an egg or a sperm, just depending upon what organism I was trying to make. And so meiosis, the entire idea is to go, I can't spell that, is to go from a diploid to a haploid state. I want to go from a full set to a half. But remember, that's important to go to half because if I have half the number of chromosomes, when they come together, so there's my egg, here's a sperm with half, and they come together, I get to make that zygote. Now, I'll have that restored diploid number again. So let's compare a couple things really quickly, okay? Let's compare, let's do mitosis versus meiosis. Mitosis versus meiosis. All right, let's talk about cell types. All right, mitosis, that happens in body or somatic cells. Meiosis only happens in germ cells. Okay, the purpose of mitosis, right, is to start at a diploid cell and to end at a diploid cell, because I'm just trying to make more body cells, right? Like that's my job, is to make more body cells. Versus over here, my meiosis, I'm going to start at the diploid state because that's what those are body cells, but I want to end at a haploid state because my job, my function over here is to make gametes, which are egg or sperm. Okay? Difference over here still is mitosis. I only went through 1 division of my cell versus meiosis. Characteristic of it is I go through 2 divisions. I want to go through 2 divisions so that way I end up in that whole haploid state. The things that are similar between them, so things that they both share, right? Things that they both share. Okay, so this is going to happen in eukaryotes, and you still have to go through the cell cycle, which means both of them, you're still going to have to double your DNA. Because if I don't double my DNA, then this one won't work right? Because if I have this, and I have 1 tick, and then I can't divide that, so 1 would get it and 1 wouldn't, and that would be super, super bad, because I would only be making 1 cell at a time, and that's not enough, right? I want to start with a tick, go through cell cycle, have a replicated chromosome, divide, and then get 2 cells each with the tick. So I start diploid, I end diploid. Versus meiosis, so here's my awesome little tick. I'm going to go through cell cycle, and then, oops, oh yeah, 2 of them actually, there you go. So then I'll divide once through meiosis 1, they each get a chromosome, and then I get to go through meiosis 2, where I make 4 cells, each with that. Actually, that's another good distinction between these, is right up here, mitosis, I make 2 cells. Up here at meiosis, I make 4 cells, right? And then another distinction is because all I did was copy the DNA, right? These are going to make identical cells. Versus this one over here, I actually get to make, because they all have different pieces of the chromosome, I get to make genetically diverse cells, okay? And then the processes that go with this, or not processes, but the type of reproduction, mitosis is asexual. And remember, A means without, and sex is talking about egg and sperm. Versus meiosis over here, right? This is a part of sexual reproduction because I'm making those egg and sperm. Then let's go ahead and go through the differences of asex versus sex really, really quickly as far as reproduction goes. So if I have asexual reproduction versus sexual reproduction. Okay, difference. Asexual, these will give you clonal cells, right? Versus sexual reproduction, this will give me unique or genetically different cells. Asexual reproduction, I go through mitosis. Sexual, because remember sex made me, so I go through meiosis. The good thing about asexual reproduction, right, if we want to talk about it, asexual reproduction, good thing, that this is a really, really fast process. Because it'd be like me putting a piece of paper on a copier and making 100 copies. I can do that super, super quick, right? Versus over here, that's what's bad about it, is that since we have to divide it twice, and we have to be a little bit more careful, this is going to be a slow process. So what's bad over here, though, it's always going to be the opposite. What's bad over here, though, is that I make a clone. So if something happens, if we have 3 cells, and something happens to all the orange cells, that means my entire population is going to be ruined. Versus over here, since all of my cells are genetically different, if I have an orange cell, and I have a pink cell, and I have this kind of orange cell, if something happens and red-orange cells die, okay, well those 2 die, but this guy gets to live. That means he has a better chance of reproducing, and if he reproduces, then he's going to start making more, right? And so then those are going to be more adapted to their environment. Of course, we'll start having variations show up, so maybe an orange one will pop back up, and maybe there was a mutation, and now I get a green one. But asexual, good for fast. That's why we like this for body cells, right? We can go ahead and put that in here. This is a somatic cell process versus sexual reproduction. These are going to be germ cells. And we like that because germ cells, because we divide them twice, gives us genetically different things. And if they're genetically different, then they're more likely to survive in an environment. So let's go through what diploid and haploid cells are, okay? So if I'm a diploid cell, remember diploid means 2 sets, right? Because you get one from mom, you get one from dad. So diploid cells are body cells. Diploid cells are somatic cells. And diploid cells are going to be germ cells, because a germ cell is still a body cell. It's just a special kind. Versus if I look at haploid, the only haploid cells I have are my gametes, which are egg or sperm. And I want them to be haploid because if I have half, and then I add that to another half, I go through fertilization to make that zygote, that means I restore my number, I get back to my diploid state. And that's a really good thing, because I need all of that information to function. And then once I have that zygote, okay, so here's another diploid, whoops, a zygote is a diploid cell, because I just restored it after I went through that whole fertilization process. Then that zygote is going to go through mitosis, right, which is just to grow and make more cells. And so then, when he divides, he'll have the normal set again, and that's how you start getting your organism. But then what makes your organism different? Well, to have the different cell types, that's when I go through differentiation and I get to make a whole organism. Like let's say I make a cute little fox, right? That's when I go through differentiation, is to make the different cell types. Then those cell types will still go through mitosis to make more of their body cells, so that way they can repair and replace and all the stuff that we had talked about originally. All right, that's notes for the day. If you guys ever have any questions, you know where to find me.